Thank you all for joining today for the FY25 NIDIS Coping with Drought, Understanding and Assessing Drought in a Changing Climate informational webinar. My name is Britt Parker. I'm with the National Integrated Drought Information System in Boulder, Colorado. Welcome to the webinar. I serve as the program officer for this competition, and I'm also joined today by Joel Lisenby, who's on our staff at NIDIS and who is an integral part of some initiatives here to better understand drought assessment in a changing climate. So he'll be available to help me with questions at the end. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and will be available on the Climate Program Office FY25 Funding Opportunity and Drought.gov web pages, along with a transcript and frequently asked questions generated from the Q&A portion of this webinar. This FAQ will be periodically updated with questions that come in so that all can benefit from the answers. So we're holding this webinar in advance of the letter of intent due date as an opportunity to clarify the focus and requirements of this competition, as well as answer questions that you might have. Note that we'll be answering questions generally on the focus of the competition, the logistics and process of applying, but we will not be able to comment directly on your ideas for projects that might fit under this. So these will be more on process and the scope of the competition. And our goal is to be clear and consistent with the information that we are providing. We'll take questions at the end of this presentation, but you may enter your questions at any time in the questions box on your control panel. So today I'll be briefly covering the following topics. What is the NOAA Climate Program Office? What is NIDIS? The Assessing Drought in a Changing Climate initiative at NIDIS that this competition is based on, important details about the competition. I'll briefly go over letter of intent and application requirements, important dates, and then open it up for questions. So the NOAA Climate Program Office manages competitive research programs in which NOAA funds high priority climate science, assessments, decision support research, outreach, education, and capacity building activities designed to advance our understanding of the Earth's climate system and to foster the application of this knowledge in risk management and adaptation efforts. The National Integrated Drought Information System sits within the Climate Program Office, and this competition is one of 8 that are currently active within the broader office. And Joel is going to drop some links in the chat box as we go through this presentation so that you have access to information on the different pieces of the puzzle, which I'll be talking about. So Joel, if you don't mind dropping the Climate Program Office website into the chat box, that would be great. The National Integrated Drought Information System was authorized in 2006 and is a multi-agency partnership that coordinates drought monitoring, forecasting, planning, and research at national, state, and local levels across the country. The mission of NIDIS is to help the nation move from an increasingly proactive approach to an increasingly proactive approach in understanding and managing drought risk and impact, and to improve long-term drought resilience with a mandate to establish a national drought early warning system. Since its inception, NIDIS has been working with various federal, state, local, and tribal government agencies, as well as a network of researchers, academics, resource managers, and policymakers to support efforts to improve prediction, forecasting, and monitoring, and collaborating with existing programs and partners to undertake applied research and drought planning and preparedness. And we share this work and collate drought resources on the US Drought portal at drought.gov, which Joel has just dropped into the chat. While our ultimate goal is a national early warning system, we recognize that impacts and information needs differ across the country. So our approach to achieve this goal is to develop regional drought early warning systems, or DEWs, which are networks of partners sharing information and actions that help communities cope with drought. Each DEWs has many of the same basic ingredients, but ultimately have their own flavor to reflect the needs of the region. These systems are not simply in place to disseminate information and forecasts, but really to encourage innovation by integrating new, locally relevant drought information and supporting the introduction of new technologies that detect and communicate drought risk and warnings. In addition, we encourage learning across these early warning systems and value projects and approaches that are transferable. There are currently 9 DOs across the United States covering CONUS west of the Mississippi, the Midwest, Northeast, and Southeast. And we're also working to strengthen our support to partners in areas such as Alaska, Hawaii, and the Pacific Islands, and the US Caribbean, as well as other areas that are not currently part of a formal drought early warning system. So let's start talking about the grant competition itself. So information on all 8 active competitions through the Climate Program Office, including this one, can be found on the Climate Program Office webpage under the Funding Opportunities tab. We also have information on the Coping with Drought page on drought.gov. So I'm going to pause while Joel dumps a bunch of links in the chat box, and we'll do this again near the end of the webinar for those who might join late. But we will be going over all of these resources throughout this webinar. That includes the full funding announcement, the information sheet for this competition, an application checklist, as well as application guidance. So now let's move on to the specifics of the FY25 competition. So over the last several years, concerns have been raised about the intensity, duration, and frequency of droughts changing in the future. This poses new challenges for drought assessment. Current methods for assessing drought conditions do not consistently and deliberately consider drought in the context of climate change, and thereby unintentionally promote drought response strategies that may be limited in building long-term resilience in a changing climate. In November of 2023, the NOAA Climate Program Office and NIDIS released the Assessing Drought in a Changing Climate Technical Memorandum, based on a technical workshop co-hosted by NIDIS and the U.S. Department of Agriculture Climate Hubs. The technical memorandum is the result of input from more than 100 subject matter experts who during the meeting identified priority actions and outstanding research questions aimed to address this issue. This technical memorandum is the focus of the FY25 NIDIS Coping with Drought grant competition, and Joel has placed a link to the website for this report in the chat box. For FY25, the Coping with Drought, Understanding and Assessing Drought in a Changing Climate competition will be focused on improving drought indicator performance to account for non-stationarity, with the goal of more accurate drought assessments that support communities in preparing for, mitigating, and responding to drought. Exemplar research questions include, but are not limited to, the following. How well do current drought indices depict drought conditions, and are they effective given regional differences in non-stationarity? How is the regional variability of drought indicators and indices changing over time with climate change? How can existing or new drought indicators or indices, for example, snowpack or groundwater, be utilized or adapted to improve drought assessment and predictability in a changing climate? In some climates, low frequency, high intensity precipitation events are becoming more common. How are these events reflected in drought indicators and or indices, and how does this impact drought assessment temporally and spatially? And finally, how can drought indices better reflect how the intensity of an event affects drought conditions? In the case of high intensity precipitation events, are there conditions when current drought indices no longer accurately represent drought on the ground? If so, how can these times be objectively identified? So please note that proposals may address one or more of these and or other related research questions and are not expected to, nor should you address all of them in any one proposal. So for the purpose of this competition, we're providing 2 definitions. The first is that we're defining non-stationarity as the status of a time series whose statistical properties, mean, variance, etc., are changing through time. For the purposes of the funding opportunity, we're considering non-stationarity due to both anthropogenic climate change and or natural processes. And we're defining a drought indicator as a physical manifestation of drought within the climate system, while an index is a statistical representation of those indicators. So pending the availability of funds, NIDIS anticipates a funding allocation for this competition in total of $4 million. Proposals may request funding for up to 2-year grants in the form of cooperative agreements with funding up to $500,000 total over the 2 years. We anticipate funding approximately 8 projects, and applicants should consider September 1, 2025 as the start date. Please pay close attention to the following important guidelines, which are included in the information sheet. As successful proposals will, meaning they must, clearly demonstrate collaboration and partnership to include decision makers from relevant sectors and communities across all levels of government. These partners should be part of an integrated project team that will contribute subject matter expertise and/or who are beneficiaries of the results of the proposed research to ensure the results are assimilated, utilized, and enhanced drought assessment planning, early warning, response, and mitigation within our drought early warning systems after the completion of the project. This may include representatives from public and private sector, academia, local, regional, tribal, and federal governmental entities, non-governmental organizations, environmental groups, citizen groups, etc. Proposals will also demonstrate relevance to NIDIS national and regional priorities and clearly state how outcomes contribute to the needs articulated in the Assessing Drought in a Changing Climate Technical Memorandum, especially those focused on improving drought indicator performance. Proposals must demonstrate support of diversity, equity, inclusion, and environmental justice in their proposals, not only through the required statement, but in their project teams and in engagement with partners where appropriate through the proposed work. We're also asking that proposals include travel to an all-PI meeting, which we'll work with successful applicants to schedule in conjunction with a major scientific conference near the end of the grant period of performance. Proposals may, meaning we are encouraging them to demonstrate work that complements or builds on other funding sources and demonstrates external contributions, for example, in-kind contributions and/or actual funding to be leveraged with these federal research dollars. Though it's important to note for this competition, there is no match or cost share requirement. So this is not a requirement for this particular competition. There are a couple additional considerations that are important. Research that provides concrete application to drought assessment, planning, and decision-making will be given preference. Applicants are encouraged to be aware of and consider integration of research results into the regional drought early warning systems, especially where there's geographic overlap with where your project may occur, whether it be regionally or nationally. Information on our regional dues is available on drought.gov, and looks like Joel just dropped that into the chat box. Project funds will be awarded as cooperative agreements, thus ensuring a working partnership and substantial interaction between the project PIs and the NIDIS program, NOAA scientists, and other relevant staff. Projects will be expected to submit annual reports and respond, or semi-annual reports and respond to periodic data and information requests to include quarterly calls to ensure co-production throughout the process. Some of our most successful work to date has been accomplished when we work really closely with our partners, and so we're really looking closely to continue this process and working closely with successful applicants and our PIs. Also, one of NIDIS's mandates is to disseminate drought resources through the U.S. Drought Portal. And to that end, where applicable and working with you, products, tools, and results will be hosted on the U.S. Drought Portal. Okay, eligibility. So eligible applicants are institutions of higher learning, nonprofits, commercial organizations, international organizations, and state, local, and federally recognized tribal governments. Federal agencies or institutions are not eligible to receive federal assistance as grants and through this notice. However, there are special instructions for federal applicants on the CPO webpage, and I'm happy to answer questions about federal applicants during the Q&A period as well. I want to now briefly cover letters of intent and full proposals. So please see the full Notice of Funding Opportunity documentation to read the full details and ensure you meet all requirements. In addition, please ensure that you're familiar with administrative and national policy requirements to which grantees will be subjected. Investigators are strongly encouraged to submit an LOI prior to developing and submitting a full proposal using the FY25 Coping with Drought submission form, which will be in the chat box. Investigators unable to submit via the form should email their LOI directly to me at brit.parker@noaa.gov. If you email your LOI, you will receive confirmation of receipt from me. If you do not, please follow up because that likely means I have not received your LOI. Responses encouraging or discouraging a full application based on relevance will be sent to the PI within 4 weeks of the due date. And it's up to you, the PI, whether to submit a full application, no matter what the feedback is on your LOI. The letters of intent are due by 11:59 Eastern Time on September 18th of this year. The purpose of the LOI process is to provide information to potential applicants on the relevance of their proposed project to the competition in advance of preparing a full application. So we will not be providing you feedback on the technical merit of your proposal. We're looking specifically at relevance to this competition. While the LOIs are very strongly encouraged, applicants are not required to submit them, and you may still submit a full proposal even though you have not submitted an LOI. If an LOI is submitted, it should contain the following: a name of the target competition, tentative project title, the names and institutions of the lead primary investigators, as well as other co-PIs, the approximate cost of the project, a brief statement of the problem and research question to be addressed, a brief summary of work to be completed, methodology used, data sets needed or to be collected, and outcomes to be achieved. We also want to see relevance to the competition that's being targeted and a timeline, noting that for this competition, the timeline is 2 years. If these items are not included in the LOI or if it is late, we will not review it. Please note that we have developed an applicant checklist to assist you in making sure all components of your LOI and full application are submitted. So please use this as a resource. Again, responses will be sent within 4 weeks, either encouraging or discouraging the application, though the final decision on whether to submit a full proposal will lie with the PI. And Joel has provided a link again to that applicant checklist. Full applications are due by 11:59 p.m. Eastern on December 9, 2024. Failure to comply with the provisions in the Notice of Funding Opportunity for full proposals will result in the application being returned without review. So again, please use that information sheet and applicant checklist as your cheat sheets. Full applications are limited to 35 pages, single space, 12-point font with 1-inch margins. If you have a proposal with 3 or more PIs, that page limit does increase to 40. The required components of a full proposal include the following: a title page, abstract, results from prior research for the last 3 years for all PIs and co-PIs, a project narrative, budget narrative and table, abbreviated CVs for all PIs and co-PIs, current and pending support for federal research dollars, a data and information sharing plan, and a statement of diversity and inclusion. Again, please refer to the Notice of Federal Funding for a full description of all of these components. Other components that are not included in the page limit but are required are federal budget forms, indirect cost rate agreements, the non-construction program assurance, certification regarding lobbying, and letters of support. So those are required, but they do not count against your page limit. So let me talk a minute about the review and selection process. In terms of the letters of intent, those are subject to a program, meaning NIDIS-led review based on relevance to the targeted competition. Once we get to full applications, an administrative review will be completed for compliance with requirements and completeness of the application. Those that pass will proceed to an independent panel technical review, and they will look at 3 criteria: technical and scientific merit, the overall qualifications of the applicant, and project cost. Each reviewer will provide 1 score for each criterion from 1 to 5. These scores will be combined using the weighting averages to produce a single numerical score for this step. Note that more information on the weighting of these criterion can be found in the Notice of Funding Opportunity. Projects scoring at least 3 out of 5 will proceed to an independent panel review for importance, relevance, and applicability to the program goals, where each reviewer will provide a relevant score from 1 to 5. To determine the final score, the scores from the technical review will be combined with the relevance review with a weighting of 60% and 40% respectively. Okay, so before we wrap up, and this is where we all lean in close and I slow down a little bit because this is so important for this round of applications and applications to NOAA moving forward. So this year, applicants will begin the submission process of your full application, please, 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 well in advance of December 9th deadline. We always stress this, and we always have people that wait till the last minute, and it's inevitable that each year we have applications that don't make it through the process in time to be considered, and that's pretty heartbreaking. I can't stress enough that this is especially true this year. We are working with a new grant management system at NOAA. So institutions must have and maintain 3 separate registrations to apply. Those include SAM.gov, grants.gov, and ERA Commons, which is our new grant management system. The complete registration process for all 3 systems can take up to 4 to 6 weeks. The application process will then require that applications go through 2 layers of checks, the first in grants.gov and the second in ERA Commons. If there are errors in ERA Commons, you must resolve these and resubmit through grants.gov and go through the check process again. If your application does not clear checks in ERA Commons, NOAA will not receive your grant application. So please leave enough time to go through this registration and application process. There is guidance that we are providing from NOAA Fisheries, which may be a little bit confusing, but this guidance is really nice and clear on registration, the 2-check process, and resolution of common errors in ERA Commons. So please plan on submitting early, and if you have any questions as to whether your application was received, please email me directly and do not wait till the last minute to reach out for assistance. Finally, a reminder for where you can find the information you need to apply. So Joel is going to put all of these links in the chat box once more. Please make sure you read the full Notice of Federal Funding Opportunity and the Coping with Drought information sheet thoroughly to ensure you understand fully the focus and requirements of proposals. Please use the cheat sheet to make sure all components are included, and please follow the application guidelines when accessing the systems and to troubleshoot the process of navigating the new application process. So again, a recording of this presentation with transcript and frequently asked questions based on the questions today and others I've received via email will be on the CPO Funding Opportunity website, and we'll update the FAQ based on additional questions that come in periodically. Please contact me at any time with additional questions. I do want to note that after the LOIs have been reviewed and returned to the PIs, we will hold another webinar on October 23rd to walk through the general feedback on LOIs. We do this because a lot of times we find there's some common themes, and we'll go over that with everyone. I will also set up an opportunity for anyone who has an LOI to discuss their response with me in 15-minute short meetings. So that will be available to you once you get your LOI feedback as well. So I am here for you. Please, please, please reach out with any questions you have. And we will move to the Q&A portion of the webinar. And so I'm going to go to the Q&A box and just start going through what has come in. And the first question is, for projects collaborating between universities and state governments, is there a preference for which of these submit the application as a primary recipient or organizer? No, I would say that certain entities are better set up to submit grants to the federal grant making process. And so whichever partner that is, whoever is the primary on the grant should be the one who submits the application. And we aren't going to judge them differently based on who that primary applicant is. We will look holistically across the project partners when the technical panel and the relevance panel reviews them. So there is not going to be preference for one type of entity or another. The second question is, do external partners need to be identified in advance of submitting the LOI, or can we name some tentative partners and confirm them in the full proposal? So they do not need to be fully identified in the LOI, but I like the way you're thinking about this in terms of going ahead and naming tentative partners and confirming them in the full proposal. I would say too that maybe you have some ideas at the LOI stage, but that changes for the full application. That is fine too. So if someone is named in the LOI, but then it turns out that, for whatever reason, it's going to be a different partner based on their capacity, time, et cetera, or something like that, that's fine too for that to change. The next question is, how many proposals do you expect to receive? That is a tough question. We never know. But traditionally for our competitions that are research-based, I think when it comes to full applications, we've been looking at, 40 to 50 in the past. But of course, I have no idea until I see what comes in. But hopefully that gives you some idea. Are projects at the local scale, for example, in collaboration with a water utility, in scope, given that the dues is a larger regional scale? So yes, those having something like a water utility as a collaborator is fine. We do have these dues at a regional scale, but they actually involve multiple partners at multiple scales. So if you look at our dues networks, a lot of times we do have more local water utilities who are part of that network. So yes, projects with a local scale partner are in scope. The next question is there any specific geographic area of interest for this call? No, we have not specified a subset of the United States. I will say that if you look at the programmatic goals within the Notice of Federal Funding, it does talk about, quote unquote, the nation, that is the United States. And so while international organizations can apply as part of the project team, certainly to compete well, it would have to have relevance and or research focus to include the United States. So I just want to make that clear that from a programmatic standpoint, we are a US-based program. And so that is one consideration. But in terms of the United States itself, there is no geographic focus. Given the DEIJ requirements for the proposal, what recommendations do you have, yes, for applicants who work within states or at agencies and institutions that limit, restrict, and ban DEI work, excuse me. So I was worried this question would come up, and I would like to circle back with the Climate Program Office in terms of how we're going to handle this. So I do have your contact information, and I will follow up with you directly on this question. I will also include it in the FAQ. So my apologies for not being able to answer this question in real time, but I will circle back with you. We are a startup company with a new technology. Can we submit an application or not? Yes, we do accept applications from the private sector. As long as the application is relevant and focused on the topic of the competition, we would welcome your application. The next question, could the proposal include NIDIS personnel? Great question. No. And the reason is we want everyone to have an equal playing field. But what we are very interested in is collaboration with those who are successful in terms of the application process. And so while you cannot include NIDIS personnel as part of the project team, you can indicate your willingness to work with NIDIS and NIDIS staff. And we will look forward to working very closely with those applicants who are successful through the process. Let's see. The next question is a new technology to mitigate, oh, sorry, that's a note. Let's see. Next question. Is there a way to get this in front of others to know this is, I'm sorry, there's a series of comments that are following up on a question that aren't quite relevant for the whole audience. Okay. Will the LOI be used to limit the number of proposals to improve the funding rate? No. So LOIs are not required. What we try to do through the LOI is to save everybody time. If something is out of scope for the competition, we try to make that clear at that stage. But I'll remind you that it's not required and that it's always up to the PI to decide whether or not they want to submit a full application, even if their LOI results in a discouraged result. So we don't use the LOIs in that way. We're using the LOIs simply to provide feedback to potential applicants. Are partnerships with stakeholders required for the proposal? If so, should stakeholders be included as collaborators or co-PIs? So because we are a applied research program, we do want to see partnerships with stakeholders and partners who will use and apply the information and results. Now, should they be included as collaborators or co-PIs? That is really up to the applicant and the partners. If they have a large role and will be receiving funds through the grant, then I would say a co-PI. But if they're going to be part of, for example, a steering committee or a working group, or you're going to work with them at various points in the project to get feedback, and they're not receiving funds, then they can be listed as a collaborator. It's great to have letters of support from those collaborators, though again, those aren't required, but that's a great way to show that collaboration and their integral piece of the project. And so I will say that in proposals, when it comes to stakeholders and users of information, we do like to see that they're truly integrated in some way into the project from start to finish. So that's something we would like to see in the proposals. Will you try and have all U.S. regions represented across the 8 funded projects? If yes, does that mean that only one project will be funded in a particular region? So in the notice of federal funding, there is a list of criteria that we can apply to the final funding decision. Geography is one of those, but we have not specified in the NOFO that we will only fund one project per region. So no, it is certainly not that that strict by any means. And traditionally, we find that even if we have an unlimited geography, we tend to have, a couple projects in one place, one in another, maybe none in another region. For this competition, we're really looking at technical merit and, relevance to the competition. So there's nothing to say that one project has to fall into each of our regions. So that is not a formal consideration. Is it within the scope to focus on a specific type of drought? If so, is there any preference on meteorological, agricultural, or hydrological drought? No, we have not specified any specific type or definition of drought, and so there is no preference on any type or defined drought within the competition. So that is all I'm seeing so far in terms of questions. I'm going to give it another couple minutes to see if any others come in. Are the USDA climate hubs considered as federal stakeholders? Sure. I think that the climate hubs, if they're, so when I see the word stakeholder, I'm thinking you're thinking, and if you're not, please put more in the question box. You're thinking about perhaps they're one of your users of the information that you're that might result from your grant. And in this case, yes, they could be considered as a partner. And they're a great example of kind of an entity that is a translator of information, if you will, who might take scientific information and get it into the hands of farmers, ranchers, et cetera, on the ground. So I think it's a great example of a partner. If you're asking about something slightly different, please clarify with a follow-up question. Let's see. Next question. Is there a minimum research area size, for example, county or state level? There is not. I will remind you that, one of the things that we're looking for is transferability. And so if you do have, a relatively small area size that is the focus, like it might be great to include, how this might be applicable to a larger geography, but we haven't specified any minimum research area size. Follow-up question, can USDA climate hubs receive funding from this program as a federal agency? So this is where it gets a little bit complicated. As a federal agency, we can't grant funds to another federal agency. What we can do is put into place an interagency transfer between NOAA and other federal agencies. And so if you have a federal agency co-PI, and that federal agency is perhaps receiving funds, then you need to follow the instructions for multiple applicants for the same project and in the NOFO, and then anything that includes funding to a federal agency, that application has to be sent directly to me. So the grant itself would be from an institution, academic institution, would be evaluated as part of the evaluation process, but we would fund the work that includes another federal agency outside of the grant mechanism. And feel free to follow up with me directly if you do have federal partners that you want to include. It is a little bit more complicated, so that's one of those where I encourage people to reach out to me directly. Let's see. In addition to improving drought indicator performance, are you interested in proposals that emphasize indicator visualization and communication to encourage use or adoption of the indicators? I would say that could be part of it, but the goal of the competition is to improve drought indicator performance in the context of climate change and non-stationarity. And so we would want to see that that is part of the project. Can one be listed as PI or co-PI on multiple proposals? Yes, we have not indicated any restriction in terms of if if someone applies that they can or can't be listed as a co-PI on another proposal. So yes, you could be listed as PI or co-PI on multiple proposals. The definition of non-stationarity, including anthropogenic climate change, does that include the impact of climate adaptation projects on non-stationarity? So we do recognize, and I might open this up to Joel as well to weigh in on, there are many sources of non-stationarity in the system, and that includes natural processes, that includes climate change, that includes the human system. And so from that perspective, I would say yes, but Joel, if you have any points that you'd like to make to clarify that or say more, please feel free to unmute and do so.
Great, thanks, Britt. Yes, I agree with your answer, that the answer is yes. And if you know how to improve a drought indicator to include human activities, I think that would definitely be within the scope of improving a drought indicator performance.
Great, thank you. Okay, here we go. Will any preference be given for supporting students? Preference, I would say that no, but it's extremely common to see a grant team made up of, the PI co-PI being in the realm of professor academic, and then seeing a lot of postdocs and graduate students and stuff included. Where I think that would come in a bit is in terms of diversity and inclusion, and including those in many different portions of their career path in the application and in the project. So from that perspective, perhaps so, but we do traditionally see a mix across career timelines, if that makes sense, in terms of the project team. Okay, the next question, will improvement of drought indicators focus on present climate, seasonal to interannual scales, or future drought, projected climate change on decadal or longer time scales? Again, I'm going to let Joel add to my answer if he would like, but I think it could include the gamut of kind of seasonal to interannual to decadal or longer time scales. Joel, what do you want to add to that?
I think, so if we go back to what is the purpose of this grant competition, we're trying to improve the way that we are understanding drought in the context of climate change. And that is fairly general, that it was general enough that I think we would accept proposals that would span all of the different time scales, and we would let the technical committee on relevance and application of that really decide if it fits within the scope of the grant competition or not. And so that may come up at the LOI stage. But I think at this point, I would not limit any PI from proposing something looking at future drought and changes in that regard.
Yeah, and I think maybe the word I would hone in on here is or, so present climate or future droughts, and I would encourage the word and. Just to make sure that you are including that climate change piece. You mentioned a cost criteria. Does that mean that universities where the cost of research is high, for example, because because of high maybe I think it's supposed to say like high cost of students due to high cost of living are likely to be less competitive. So no, what we're looking at is that the project cost is scoped well, it makes sense. We're just as concerned with projects that come in under budgeted as we are over budgeted, but we understand that different universities have different overhead rates, etc. And so that alone would not cause us to criticize the budget. We're really looking at, is the budget commiserate with the work to be done ultimately? Do you allow course buyout in the budget? Okay, this is another question that I don't want to answer without going back to the climate program office, because this has been a topic of discussion and I'm not 100% sure where we landed. So I will answer this question directly with the person who asked it. I will also include this answer in the frequently asked questions. And if anyone else has this same question, please feel free to dump it here so I reach out to you directly, but I will put it in the frequently asked questions. Student stipends, high student stipends. Thank you for that. I think it was just a typo, so no problem. But yeah, we're really looking, is the budget commensurate with the work to be done? Where will the FAQ be published and shared? So it will be on the Climate Program Office funding website. So if you go to funding opportunities and if you scroll down to our competition, the FAQs will be there. And then we will also post it on the NIDIS, the drought.gov website. If you go to drought research and the coping with drought competition, the latest information on the latest competition will be there. We'll make sure it's there as well. If you have trouble finding this or any of the other documents or information that we've talked about, please email me directly. Any other questions? I'll pause again. And thank you to Joel for dumping all of the different links in the chat box as we went. Let me go back to the questions. Okay, so I'm not seeing any additional questions come in. I'm going to give it one more minute.
Brett, there was one more that came in.
Oh, thank you. Can we propose using different characterization of drought as an indicator? Joel, I might let you take that one. I'm not sure I fully understand. Okay, here we go. For example, the spatial extent of drought.
I think that would be fine.
Or spatial compounding of drought over multiple regions.
Right. So I think if we're going back to the definition of an indicator, it is a physical manifestation of drought in the landscape. And an index would be the statistical representation of that physical indicator. I think that beyond that definition, there are many different aspects of drought that would fall into that. I think though that there is a difference between like a physical manifestation of drought in the landscape and ways that we use to characterize individual droughts. But I think that I think that the short answer to that should still be yes. It would still, like, the extent or spatial extent or severity of a drought being measured in different ways would still fit within that indicator.
Great, thank you for that. Okay, here we go. Okay, so the research examples you listed are much more individual drought indicator focused, but are you also interested in the overall system perspective across many drought indicators akin to a DEWS? Again, I'll let Joel add on, but I think that would fit if you're, whether or not you're looking at a specific drought indicator or a set of indicators, both could fit under this competition.
I would agree that they could fit. I think some of these are questions that I'd really want to pose to the technical review panel once the LOIs come in, and let a full panel of experts decide if those are truly drought indicators and how it fits within the scope of the competition. So if you have an idea that you would like to be reviewed by the panel, the LOI stage would be a great time to do that before you put together a full proposal on it.
Well, to be clear, Joel, the panels aren't pulled together until the full application stage. But I think that if you put in an LOI with some more context around what you're thinking, certainly we'd be able to give you some feedback on whether or not that hits the mark for relevance to the competition.
Thanks for clarifying that. You're right. I remember you saying that. So the LOIs are being reviewed
internally. Yeah.
Internally. But I think my point still stands that, like, at the LOI stage, we'd like to review the idea and see how well it sticks.
Yeah, if it fits the competition or not. Yeah. If we propose to create novel data sets that can help with drought assessment that complement existing data sets, would that be within the scope? In this case, should the proposal focus more on data set creation or application? So I would encourage you to really dive deep into the informational sheet and the NOFO. There's nothing that says that a novel data set cannot be part of the proposal, but just, the challenge we're trying to solve is improving, drought indicator performance in a changing climate. So again, I think, with what you're asking, context is going to matter in terms of what you're proposing to do. And we are an applied research program. So, we definitely want to see how, if you're, developing a new data set to tackle this problem, like how that data set would be applied in addition to its creation. Okay, we have 5 more minutes. There's been a pause in the questions coming in, so I'm gonna give it a second again and see if there's anything else. Okay, while we wait, I'm just gonna restate, please reach out to me at any time. If you are considering federal partners on your proposal, please feel free to reach out with questions on the process for that. It is a little more complicated. Again, I can't stress enough not waiting till the last minute to submit your proposals. You are more than welcome to let me know you're submitting a full proposal when we get to that point, and confirming with me that everything's come through the system okay. I have no problem doing that with this new system. That, if you wait till the last minute, is going to be incredibly difficult to resolve if there is a problem. So I can't stress enough giving yourself plenty of time for the actual application in the system process. I'm going to give it 1 more minute, but I don't see any more questions coming in. If you do have questions that come to you after the webinar closes, you're welcome to email me those. And like I said, I will update the FAQ sheet once we put it up with those questions who are applicable to a broader audience and would be helpful to the broader audience. I will also restate that I cannot comment on specific proposal ideas beyond, some of the questions we've had generally about, new indicators and where focus is. I would just always refer you back to the information sheet, the focus of the competition. That is what your LOIs and your full proposals will be weighed against. So I would just encourage you to to continue to refer back to the intent of the competition. And we have a thank you here for the helpful webinar. I'm glad we can do this, and I'm glad we can tackle some of these questions as a group, because I think many people benefit from the answers. So thank you for taking part and for asking your questions. And best of luck through the process if you choose to put in an LOI or a full application. And we will look forward to working with those of you who are successful applicants to the competition. So with that, I will wrap up. Thank you, Joel, for being on here as well from a technical aspect. And I hope that you all have a wonderful rest of your week, and we look forward to seeing your LOIs when they come in. Thank you and take care.